Act like you know me, please. It's the only way they'll leave us alone. Dorian Kane froze. A billionaire CEO, trapped in a room blazing with golden lights and louder laughter. He had come to this wedding to disappear, to breathe in silence. But quiet never belonged to him. Eyes had already turned. Phones already rose. Privacy, once fragile, was gone. The whisper came from his side. Not a partner, not a social climber. Selah Monroe, a young black waitress balancing a tray. All night she had been invisible, called the wrong name, snapped at like she was furniture. A man hissed something vile as she passed. Selah had learned to swallow it, to hide behind silence. But when she saw Dorian caged by stares, she recognized the same wound. So she risked it. A single line, soft as breath, yet sharp enough to cut through the night. It wasn't romance. It wasn't a game. It was survival. One man too wealthy to escape notice. One woman too small to ever be seen. If you've ever felt lost in a crowded room, stay. This story isn't just theirs. It might be yours too. Dorian Kane sat near the edge of the garden, hoping no one would notice. He was the kind of man who could fill headlines without saying a single word. A billionaire CEO with a face too familiar for silence. Tonight, he only wanted to be another guest. Anonymous. Invisible. But anonymity was a luxury he could not afford. His presence alone was a spark in dry grass. Whispers moved from table to table. People leaned closer, nudging each other, pointing without pointing. He felt the shift in the air, subtle but sharp. Phones rose like hunting rifles. A quick flash, a subtle click. Each photo carried the weight of a possible headline, the kind of headline that could be twisted into anything. Dorian kept his eyes low, jaw steady, pretending not to notice. He had lived through worse storms. He knew the rhythm well. Attention arrives first as curiosity, then wells into spectacle. What he feared most was not the noise, but the way noise always stripped him of being human. He was a man at a wedding, but in their eyes he was a brand, a prize, a story waiting to be sold. The buzz thickened. A ripple of excitement spread across the tables like perfume in the air. Someone whispered his name and the whisper became a current. Guests craned their necks for a better look. They wanted confirmation, proof that the rumor was true. Dorian stayed seated, still, as if stillness might shield him, but the crowd's hunger grew. He caught the sound of a woman's voice saying, "That's him, right? The reclusive one?" Laughter followed. Not cruel, but careless. It wasn't about him as a person. It was about the idea of him. A headline, a trophy, an image that could be shared before dessert was served. A young man raised his phone, pretending to check a message. The lens pointed directly at Dorian. Another guest leaned closer, whispering details she didn't know, details she invented. Each story added another layer to the fiction being built around him, and in that moment, Dorian felt the same hollow ache he always carried, the ache of being reduced to a headline, stripped of his name, stripped of his skin, stripped of everything but the story others wanted to tell. Not far away, Selah Monroe moved quietly through the tables with a tray of champagne. She had practiced the smile for years. Polite, safe, forgettable, but the cracks showed every time someone snapped their fingers in her direction. "Sweetheart," one guest called, not bothering to look at her face. Another waved his glass in the air as though summoning a servant, not a woman. Someone else muttered something sharp under his breath, ugly enough to sting. Selah swallowed the words she wanted to say. She carried the tray with steady hands, though her chest tightened. She had learned the rules early. Do not answer back, do not make a scene, do not risk the job that keeps you fed. But each small insult cut a little deeper. 5 years in this work, and not once had anyone asked her name. To most guests, she was part of the furniture. Seen, but not seen. Present, but invisible. And still she kept moving, her smile stitched in place. Tonight was another night of pretending. Pretending she didn't hear, pretending she didn't care, pretending she wasn't breaking inside. When Selah glanced toward the far table, she saw him, the man the crowd had been whispering about, the one they could not leave alone. He sat, stiff, shoulders tense, eyes lowered, surrounded not by people, but by the weight of attention pressing in on him, and in that moment, she understood. Different lives, different worlds, but the same kind of trap. He was being hunted by notice. She was being crushed by disregard, both unseen in their own way. Her heart beat fast. She could ignore it, walk past him like every other guest, but something inside pushed her forward. She slowed near his chair, leaned just enough for her voice to reach him, and whispered the line, "Act like you know me. Please, it's the only way they'll leave us alone." It was a risk, a gamble, but she said it anyway, not for romance, not for attention, for survival. And when Dorian looked up into her eyes, she saw the shock, then something else, relief, maybe even recognition. That single moment bound them together. Two strangers, two masks, one fragile alliance born from a whisper. Dorian blinked, unsure if he heard correctly, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "Did you just say, 'Pretend I'm with you'?" Selah kept her eyes on the crowd, her smile fixed in place. "Yes, trust me. It's safer." Her tone was calm, but her hand tightened around the tray she carried. Dorian followed her gaze. A cluster of guests still pointed their phones, pretending to check messages, but every lens angled toward him. Across the floor, the woman in the sequin dress stalked closer, her eyes sharp with intent. Selah leaned a fraction closer, her voice steady but urgent. "If you're with me, they won't approach. People respect boundaries they can see. Alone, you're prey. With me, you're off limits." The logic was simple, almost absurd, but Dorian felt the truth of it. For a moment he considered walking away, letting the night devour him. Then he caught the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet plea hidden behind professionalism. "All right," he said. 2 words. Agreement. And in that small surrender, something shifted. The alliance was sealed. A man tired of being watched. A woman tired of being unseen. They moved side by side, nothing dramatic, no sudden gesture. Just a billionaire and a waitress walking slowly across the dance floor. Yet the effect was immediate. The phones lowered, as if a silent signal had passed through the crowd. The whispers softened, losing interest. Even the woman in the sequin dress stopped short, frowned, and turned away with a sigh. Dorian noticed the shift. The pressure that had been building, the weight of all those stares, eased for the first time that night. He looked at Selah, surprised. She gave him a quick, professional smile, the kind you use on guests who test your patience. "See?" she whispered. "It works." Her confidence startled him. This wasn't about charm or games. It was survival, plain and simple. And it worked better than any bodyguard, better than any disguise. For the first time in months, maybe years, Dorian felt the smallest sense of relief. Selah had drawn a circle around them, and inside that circle, the world hesitated to intrude. It wasn't romance. It wasn't magic. It was strategy. But it made them both breathe a little easier. Selah guided him toward the edge of the reception tent, past the glittering chandeliers, past the polished silver trays. They slipped behind a linen divider into the space reserved for staff. The air changed instantly. No perfume, no laughter, just the smell of roasted duck cooling in pans. Folding chairs scattered against the wall. Plastic water bottles half empty. A paper plate with a slice of cake, frosting melting at the edges. "This is the safest corner," Selah said, setting down her tray. She pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit. Dorian looked around, stunned by the contrast. A few steps away, people drank champagne under chandeliers. Here, the staff shared leftovers in silence. "You eat back here?" he asked quietly. Selah shrugged. "Where else? We're not guests. We're scenery." The words landed heavier than she intended. Dorian sat anyway, his tailored suit creasing against the folding chair. He had dined on 12 courses in private clubs, but here, among plastic forks and paper plates, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Breath, space, humanity. Selah sat across from him, her flats kicked off under the table. She rubbed her feet gently, sighing as if the act itself was rebellion. 5 years, she said softly. 5 years, carrying trays at weddings like this. Governors' daughters, tech millionaires, families with names longer than their guest lists. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't break. It simply flowed, calm but heavy. "I've poured champagne, cleared plates, smiled when people snapped their fingers like I was a dog, smiled when they whispered things they wouldn't dare say out loud. Do you know how many asked me my name?" Dorian shook his head, his throat tight. 2, Selah said, "and one of them was you." The silence that followed cut deeper than any insult. She leaned back, arms crossed, her eyes fierce now. "Last summer, a groomsman spilled red wine on me. On purpose. Laughed, told me to relax. His fiancée called me help like it was my legal name. My manager told me to apologize for making them uncomfortable. The words hung in the air, unapologetic, raw, a woman too tired to keep pretending. Dorian listened, jaw tight. Then he exhaled, slowly. His turn. "There was a woman," he began. "We were together 8 months. I thought it was love, thought she cared." Selah said nothing. She let him speak. "One morning, I woke up and every detail of my life was on a tabloid site. How I slept with the sound machine, how I texted at 2 in the morning, how I once cried in my car after firing someone." His voice caught, not with anger, but shame. "They printed all of it, turned me into a punchline, made me look weak, pathetic, like I wasn't allowed to be human." Selah's eyes softened. Damn. Dorian almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Yeah. Damn. For a moment, the staff corner grew very quiet. The tent outside pulsed with laughter, clinking glasses, bright music. In here sat 2 people stripped bare by different kinds of cruelty. One ignored, one exposed, both unseen. "Money makes you visible," he whispered, "but not seen." Selah nodded slowly. She knew exactly what he meant. Selah looked at him across the table. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "You got burned, I know, and you built walls. You keep people out because you can. That's your choice." Dorian frowned slightly. She leaned forward. "I don't get that luxury. I don't get to shut down when I'm hurt. If I put up walls, I lose my job. I lose rent. I lose everything." Her words fell like stones, heavy, undeniable. "I smile when I don't want to. I laugh when they insult me. I nod when they call me sweetheart, honey, help, because if I don't get to keep my income. I don't get to keep my place in the world." Dorian looked down. He had never thought of survival in those terms. To him, silence was protection. To her, silence was survival itself. Selah didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet conviction in her tone was louder than anger. For the first time that night, Dorian felt the sharp edge of his privilege. The silence stretched between them. Neither knew what to say next. Then Dorian reached for the paper plate. The slice of wedding cake was uneven. Frosting smeared, crumbs falling apart. He cut it cleanly with a plastic fork, then slid the larger piece across the table toward her. Selah blinked. "What's this?" "You've earned the bigger piece," he said softly. It wasn't grand. It wasn't expensive, but it was something. A gesture small enough to be overlooked by anyone else, yet to her it felt like dignity. Selah accepted the plate, her lips curving in a quiet smile. Not the polite mask she wore for guests, but something warmer, real. For months, Dorian had been surrounded by lavish dinners, rare wines, crystal glass. None of it mattered. This paper plate, shared in silence, meant more than all of it. In that moment, Selah felt seen. Not as scenery, not as background, but as a person who deserved the bigger slice. Selah rested her fork on the plate, looking straight at him. Her voice dropped low, almost like a confession. "People can look at you," she said slowly, "and still not see you at all." The words landed in the quiet corner like a truth too sharp to ignore. Dorian froze, his chest tightening. Selah wasn't seeking pity. She was naming a reality Dorian understood far too well. He thought back to the cameras, the flashes, the headlines that carved him into a product. He thought of how many times he had sat in rooms filled with people who wanted everything but his humanity. Her eyes didn't waver. "That's the hardest part. Not the hours, not the aching feet. It's the way you disappear even when people stare right at you." Dorian exhaled, long and unsteady. He had no answer. There was none. For a moment they sat in silence, their pain reflected back at each other. 2 lives from opposite worlds, yet bound by the same invisible wound. The fragile quiet shattered with a sharp voice from across the divider. "Well, would you look at that? The help got herself a billionaire." Selah stiffened. Dorian turned, his eyes narrowing. Standing just beyond the curtain was Cassandra Veyron. Tall, elegant, a backless gold dress that glittered under the lights. She crossed her arms, chin lifted, eyes dripping with disdain. "Didn't know table service came with upgrades," Cassandra sneered. Her voice was loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Laughter rippled through the room. Selah's face burned. Every ounce of dignity she had gathered in that quiet corner collapsed in a single instant. She gripped the table, fighting the urge to vanish. Dorian's chair scraped back against the floor as he stood. His expression hardened, jaw set. Cassandra tilted her head, smiling sweetly. "Relax, Marcus. I'm just making an observation." But it wasn't an observation. It was an attack. A reminder of where Selah was expected to stay. Below. Silent. Invisible. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for the spectacle to unfold. Dorian stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "You're out of line." Cassandra arched an eyebrow, smirk still in place. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me it's true. You're slumming it?" The words cut like glass. A few guests gasped, others laughed nervously. Selah wished she could disappear. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Dorian moved closer, eyes locked on Cassandra. "Let me be clear. If I were with Selah—" He paused, the weight of the moment heavy on his tongue. "I'd be lucky." The tent fell silent. Even the music seemed to fade. The crowd, hungry for scandal, froze in place. Cassandra's smirk faltered, her face flushing red. "Careful, Dorian," she snapped. "Emotion doesn't look good on you." "Then maybe," he replied, his voice cold as steel. "It's time I stopped caring about the look." Gasps spread across the room. Selah's heart pounded. For a second, she felt both defended and exposed, caught between gratitude and humiliation. In the stunned silence, everyone saw her, but not for the reason she wanted. Selah's chair scraped softly as she stood. Her hands trembled, though she hid them at her sides. The crowd's eyes still burned against her skin. Dorian's defense had silenced the room, but it had also painted a target on her back. She wanted to feel protected. She wanted to thank him. But instead, she felt exposed, fragile, like a display set out for judgment. Her chest rose with shallow breaths. In their silence, people weren't admiring her. They were dissecting her, staring as if she was a spectacle, not a woman. Selah turned away. Each step felt heavy, her body rigid with restraint. She didn't rush, but her whole being screamed for escape. Behind her, Dorian watched, confusion twisting his features. He had stood up for her. Why did it feel like he had made it worse? Selah kept her eyes down, weaving past tables, heading for the exit. Her jaw stayed tight, her back straight. But inside, shame clawed at her. She hadn't been rescued. She had been put on stage. By the time she slipped into the cool night air, her hands were shaking. Later, behind the catering tent, Selah stood with her arms folded. The night air clung damp against her skin. Dorian found her there, his voice low. "Selah, I shouldn't have let it get that far." She didn't turn. Her gaze stayed fixed on the dark sky. "You think this was the first time someone reminded me where I belong?" He flinched at her tone. Soft, but sharp enough to cut. She finally faced him, her eyes shining. Not with tears, but with control. "You thought standing up for me fixed something, but all it did was make me look like I couldn't fight my own battle." Dorian's throat tightened. "I just couldn't stay quiet." Selah drew a breath, folding her arms tighter. "Sometimes quiet is what keeps us alive. Sometimes survival looks like silence." Her words hung heavy. He wanted to argue, to say silence was cowardice, but her eyes told him it was truth. Truth born from living in a world that punished her for speaking. He dropped his gaze. And for once, the man with all the answers had nothing to say. The air between them shifted. Thick with tension, heavy with words left unsaid. Dorian stepped closer, uncertain. "Selah," he murmured. His chest ached, his voice low, stripped of armor. She looked at him, searching for something, maybe honesty, maybe proof he understood. The night hummed with silence, the kind that feels louder than sound. Neither planned it, neither expected it. Yet when their eyes held too long, the distance collapsed. Selah's hand brushed his, hesitant, testing. He didn't pull away. The world around them faded. The laughter from the tent, the clink of glasses, even the rustle of magnolia leaves. Dorian leaned in, slow, giving her space to turn away. She didn't. Instead, she met him halfway. Their lips touched, not polished, not rehearsed. A kiss born not from romance, but recognition. Two people who had seen each other's shadows and did not look away. It wasn't desperate, it wasn't dramatic, it was real. And in that fragile stolen moment, the masks they had worn all night slipped away. The kiss lingered only a moment. Soft. Fragile. Then, a sharp click. A flash lit the hedge line 20 feet away. Quick, almost hidden, but enough to slice the night in two. Selah pulled back, her breath catching. Her eyes widened, already knowing. Dorian turned and saw him. A guest, unsteady from champagne, phone raised in triumph. The glow of the screen lit a smirk across his face. He didn't wait. He walked briskly back toward the tent, fingers flying across the screen. Selah whispered, almost to herself, "They got it, didn't they?" Dorian's chest tightened. He nodded once. "Yeah." The night seemed to close in around them. What should have been a private moment was already gone, swallowed whole. Selah stepped away, her expression unreadable. Dorian reached toward her, but stopped. The damage had been done. In the distance, laughter swelled again, unaware of the storm about to break. By morning, the photo was everywhere. Blogs, Twitter threads, business forums that had nothing to do with weddings, comment sections filled with strangers dissecting every detail. Some called it brave, beautiful, proof that love didn't care about color or class. Others were cruel. Gold digger, charity case, publicity stunt. The image spread faster than wildfire, faster than any press release could contain. For Selah, it was unbearable. She deleted her social media, ignored her phone, stopped answering messages. She quit the catering company within days, leaving no forwarding address. For Dorian, the scandal was noise he had weathered before. He had lawyers, he had media teams, he had privilege, but none of it could shield her. He drafted statements, planned ways to protect her name, but each time she blocked him with silence. And then, one morning, a message arrived, short, final. The message read, "Please don't let this die quietly. I don't want to be a headline. I just want it to matter to someone." Dorian sat frozen, the words burning across the screen. He had been called ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. None of those names had ever cut him. But this cut straight through. She hadn't asked for fame. She hadn't asked for money. She had asked for the smallest, simplest thing, to matter. His chest ached. He read the message again, then again, hoping to find subtext, some hidden promise. But it was clear. Selah wasn't reaching for him. She was retreating, protecting what little of herself the world hadn't already stolen. Dorian set the phone down, his hands shaking. For years he had hidden from cameras, terrified of being seen too much. Selah's tragedy was the opposite. She had lived invisible, and the one time she was seen, it was for the wrong reason. The irony crushed him. And in the silence that followed, Dorian knew he had lost more than a story. He had lost someone real. Selah vanished. She quit the catering company without notice. No address left behind. No number to call. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight, wiped clean as if she had never been there. For Dorian, the world still roared. Meetings, deals, photos in glossy magazines, the kind of noise most people dreamed of reaching. Yet for him, it was hollow. Each round of applause only reminded him of her silence. He tried calling. No answer. Emails bounced back. Friends of friends said she had gone quiet, not hiding in shame, but retreating for survival. At night, he replayed the message in his mind. "I just wanted to matter to someone." The words gnawed at him more than headlines ever had. He had been a man defined by his wealth, his power, his walls. But none of that helped him now. Not $1, not one contract could bridge the absence she left behind. The silence around her became louder than any scandal, and in that silence Dorian felt smaller than he had in years. 3 months passed. The world moved on like it always did. The photo of their kiss slid down news feeds, replaced by fresher scandals, newer faces. Attention shifted to another wedding, another celebrity breakup, another shiny distraction. But Dorian did not move on. He carried her absence like a stone in his chest. At every event, he checked the staff list. At every gala, he scanned the catering crew, searching faces for her. Each time, he felt the sharp sting of disappointment. In boardrooms, he signed contracts, but his mind drifted. At dinners, he raised glasses, but tasted nothing. What haunted him wasn't the kiss. It was the look in her eyes that night. The way she saw him not as a brand, not as a billionaire, but as a man. The loneliness dug deeper than scandal. It wasn't the crowd he missed. It was her. And though the world had let her fade, he could not. Not when she had been the only one to see through his mask. It was late October when he saw her again. A charity gala in Austin, smaller than the ones he usually attended. A renovated warehouse with exposed brick, soft lighting, a string quartet playing in the corner. He hadn't planned to come, but the moment he walked in, adjusting his cufflinks, he froze. Across the room stood Selah, not with a tray, not in uniform. She wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back, clipboard in hand. She moved with confidence, directing staff, checking lights, guiding vendors. She wasn't background anymore. She was command. Dorian stayed still, afraid that moving would break the spell. He studied her from a distance, noticing what had changed. Not her appearance, her presence. She carried authority now. Calm, grounded, like someone who had reclaimed space stolen from her. For the first time in months, Dorian felt something stir. Hope. Selah looked up then, as if sensing him. Their eyes met across the room. No smile, no frown, just a single nod, a silent invitation. And Dorian knew. This was not the same woman he had left behind. He crossed the floor slowly, every step heavy with the memory of their last night together. When he reached her, Selah spoke first. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I almost didn't come," he admitted. His voice was quieter than she remembered. She glanced at her clipboard, then back at him. Calm, professional, in control. "Well, welcome. Tonight's about raising funds for education, not gossip." Dorian studied her, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "You look the same." Selah raised a brow. "Do I?" "No," he corrected himself. "You look like you own the room." For the first time, she let a real smile appear. Small, earned. The shift between them was undeniable. Months ago, she had been forced into the background. Tonight, she stood at the center, defining the space around her. And Dorian realized something simple but powerful. She no longer needed him to shield her. She had built her own ground to stand on. Still, he couldn't ignore what pulled him back to her. Not power, not scandal, but the quiet truth that he still saw her, clearly. Later that evening, they found themselves on the rooftop terrace. The city stretched below, lights flickering like restless stars. A line of paper lanterns swayed in the autumn breeze. Selah leaned on the railing, clipboard set aside, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. Dorian joined her, leaving just enough space to respect the distance between them. He spoke first. "I didn't come here to impress anyone, not donors, not press. I didn't even announce I'd be here." Selah gave a small nod. "I noticed." Dorian drew a long breath. "I'm tired of hiding, tired of performing the man everyone expects, the brand, the billionaire. I want to live as myself again, even if it's messy, even if it's hard." He turned to her, his voice lower now. "The truth is, I miss you. I miss the way you saw me. Not the headlines, not the walls, just me." Selah studied him, eyes searching for cracks in his words. He let her. He offered no armor, no mask, only the man he was, stripped of protection. For the first time in years, Dorian wasn't selling an image. He was risking himself. Selah listened in silence. The wind tugged at her curls, her gaze steady, unflinching. Finally, she spoke. "You say you want to live as yourself, that you're tired of pretending." "Yes," he answered. His voice was rough, honest. Her tone stayed calm, but her words were sharp. "Then hear me clearly. Don't show up like a hero. Don't swoop in to save me from the world. I don't need saving." Dorian's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. "What I need," she continued, "is a man who stays. Stays when it's uncomfortable. Stays when it's not easy. Stays when silence feels safer than standing beside me." The rooftop air grew heavy. She wasn't asking for flowers or apologies or promises written in the glow of the city lights. She was asking for presence, consistency, the thing she had never been given before. Dorian felt the weight of her challenge settle into his chest. It wasn't about what he could provide, it was about what he was willing to endure. He nodded slowly. "I hear you." For Selah, that was the only place to start. The rooftop was still. Paper lanterns swayed above them, their light flickering soft against the city skyline. Dorian's voice broke the silence. "I won't pretend anymore." The words hung between them. Selah searched his face, looking for hesitation. She found none, just the steady gaze of a man stripped down to truth. Slowly, he extended his hand. Not as a grand gesture, not as a performance, simply as an invitation. Selah hesitated only a breath, then she placed her hand in his. There was no music waiting for them, no audience, no cameras, only the rhythm of their own steps as they began to sway under the night sky. The dance was unpolished, awkward at first, yet it carried something neither of them had felt before. Freedom. They weren't acting. They weren't shielding. They weren't pretending to belong to each other. In that moment, they simply did. And for Dorian, who had lived under the weight of fame, and Selah, who had lived under the shadow of invisibility, This was the rarest kind of power, to be seen, to be held, without masks. Weeks later, there was no rooftop, no lanterns, no city skyline, only a small cafe in Brooklyn. Sunlight streamed through the window, pooling across a worn wooden table. Dorian sat in a plain navy hoodie, no cufflinks, no cameras, no curated image. Selah sat across from him in jeans and a white blouse, hair loose around her shoulders. On the table sat 2 mugs of coffee and a single lemon scone, split between them. They didn't need chandeliers or champagne. The simplicity itself felt like a victory. For the first time, they weren't defined by roles. Not billionaire, not waitress, not scandal, not spectacle. They were just 2 people, sitting across from each other, sharing food, sharing silence. Selah smiled, genuine and unforced. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Dorian nodded, stirring his coffee. "It feels real." Outside, people hurried past, chasing schedules, scrolling screens. Inside, time slowed. The masks had fallen away. What remained was enough. Being seen isn't about fame. It isn't about headlines. It's about being understood. Selah and Dorian's story lingers as more than a romance. It is a reminder that some people live under the blinding light of too much attention, while others carry the weight of being invisible. Both wounds cut deep. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forced to wear a mask just to survive, remember this: you are worthy. Worthy of being noticed for who you are, not what the world demands from you. Worthy of love that doesn't ask you to perform. Worthy of a place where you don't have to pretend. Their journey shows that we don't need perfection, grand gestures, or flawless images. What we need is recognition. To sit across from someone and know they see us, fully. To drop the act and still be accepted. So, if this story moved something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you trust. Leave a comment, let your voice be heard. And subscribe so you won't miss the next story that dares to strip away the masks we all wear. Because the moment we stop pretending, that's when the real story begins.